From Washington to Moscow, New York to Paris, Rome to Jerusalem, the prophecies of the Bible are being fulfilled. Stand by for J.R. Church and today's Prophecy in the News.
On this edition of Prophecy in the News, we're going to interview Texe Mars. He is the author of the book Dark Majesty, The Secret Brotherhood, and The Magic of 1,000 Points of Light. That's an interesting title you've given here. On page 66 of your book, there is a ruling here by the Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court in 1911, regarding the High Court's decree that the Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company must be dissolved at once. Quote, for the safety of the Republic, we now decree that the dangerous conspiracy must be ended by November 15th, 1911. They not only call Standard Oil and the Rockefeller Group dangerous, but they call it a conspiracy as well. Tell us about the Rockefellers.
You know, a lot of people don't understand that. First of all, people say, is there really a world conspiracy? Oh, I don't believe in conspiracies. But JR, as you know, the world has operated, history has moved through conspiracies. Mm-hmm. Whether it's the communist conspiracy of Marx and Lenin, or the really the red communist conspiracy of Mao Zedong. He was able to take over a whole nation with a small band of conspirators. Hitler had a small band of thugs as well. He was able to take over a modern country, almost all of Europe, based on a conspiracy. And he was a member of a secret society, really a devil-worshipping group, in effect. And those kinds of secret societies still exist today, and they're exposed in Dark Majesty. So there is no doubt at all that a conspiracy is what moves the world. And now, in these days, that's exactly what we're facing in this book, Dark Majesty, and what is exposed in it.
Let's talk about the group that met, the Bilderberger group that met in June of 1991 in Baden-Baden, Germany. David Rockefeller was the first keynote speaker, and as he began to speak, he expressed his gratitude for the New York Times, Time Magazine, the Washington Post, and other publishers who had sat on this thing for 40 years and had not told the public the plans they are making for world control. I think it's unconscionable that our news media should keep such a thing hidden.
These major newspapers, JR, they talk about Christians, and they blast us and they say, oh, you guys are bigots, you're censors.
Yeah.
What are they doing but censoring the news? Some of their top publishers have been invited to these secretive Bilderberger meetings, but they've taken a vow of silence, not to tell. And this has been going on for 40 years, since 1954, when the first meeting of the Bilderbergers was at Hotel Bilderberg. In fact, that's the reason for their name, why they're called the Bilderbergers. You mentioned David Rockefeller.
Yeah.
You have to understand, this is not only David Rockefeller. He has a son now that's coming up. It's not only the banking industry, but we're talking about oil. We're talking about certainly the savings and loans.
The Fortune 500.
The Fortune 500, many of those groups. Some of those groups, for example, the chairman of Xerox Corporation was at the Bilderberger meeting. Giovanni Agnelli of Fiat Automobiles in Italy was at that meeting. A man named Lord Carrington, who is with a number of banking interests in Great Britain and was recently involved, as you know, with the United Nations in the Yugoslavian catastrophe down there as one of the negotiators. He was at the Bilderbergers meeting. But if we look at this conspiracy in its total, just looking at the Rockefeller dynasty, you have to realize of the Rockefellers. First of all, the Rockefellers were the ones who donated the land upon which the United Nations building now sits. So the United Nations, they donated the building in which is now housed the World Council of Churches. In fact, John D. Rockefeller founded the Federal Council of Churches. That's the first name of it. So an apostate group like that, founded by the Rockefellers. Just as a little side note, it's very interesting that one of the Rockefellers, Nelson Rockefeller, who was governor of New York at the time, is the one who made Ross Perot a rich man.
How about that?
The state of New York was computerizing at that time. It's
fact,
welfare, it's Medicare.
Ross Perot is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, isn't
He is a member. This is something I don't know that's ever been on a Christian program before. But he is a member. And an amazing thing, George Bush seconded the nomination, sent a letter. According to the May 29th, 1992 issue of the New York Times, page 1, it was George Bush who sent a letter to Winston Lord, the chairman of the Council on Foreign Relations, nominating Ross Perot to be a member.
One of the good old boys.
Isn't that an incredible thing? So we have the Rockefeller Bush connection even with Ross Perot.
Now back to this meeting of the Bilderbergers group in Baden-Baden, Germany in June of 1991. Invited secretly to Baden-Baden was key Democratic Party contender Governor Bill Clinton of Arkansas. Clinton was questioned and auditioned by what you call here the conspirators, and he passed with flying colors. Tell us more.
J.R., I think this needs to be prefaced just a moment. A lot of people ask, is God more in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party? The fact is, God is not Republican or Democrat, whichever way we may vote. Now, there are certain candidates that I have to tell you I lean toward myself. I'm not going to endorse one on this program. But I lean toward, if they at least express and act favorably toward certain Christian values, pro-life, for example.
Yes.
And I respect that. But if we believe that because a politician may support us on one or another of these issues, very vital issues, that they are going to be the party of God, we have a real problem here.
Yeah, that's right. Well, look, the Republicans have been in charge of the White House for 12 years now, and we haven't seen one real thing done to stop abortion.
That's right, and as a matter of fact...
All talk.
It's all talk. Not only that, there was a chance to stop much of abortion just a few months ago when the Supreme Court ruled, you might say, ruled again on Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
And there was, as you know, it was a 5-4 vote. The man who cast the deciding vote was David Souter. He was appointed by George Bush. In other words, Roe versus Wade would have been overturned except that George Bush gave us a pro-abortion man in Mr. Souter. So now Bill Clinton is telling us flat out, he says, if I'm elected president, I'm going to put a man on this, men or women on the Supreme Court who are for abortion, pro-choice.
Cuomo.
Maybe Mario Cuomo. He has said flat out, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
George Bush said, I won't do it. I'll put a pro-life person on. He lied.
Yeah.
Just like when he read my lips. He put a pro-abortion advocate on. He also said he would clean up pornography in government, but he gave us the National Endowment for the Arts. He appointed the most liberal of pro-pornography men, John Frohnmeyer, to head the National Endowment for the Arts. So you're absolutely right. What they say and what they do are two different things, and that's why Americans are so frustrated and so angry, because they ask the question, is there a dime's worth of difference between the two candidates? Now, when we get to this conspiracy that I unravel in Dark Majesty, we find that there may not be a dime's worth of difference between the two candidates. But you were asking about Bill Clinton. Let's go back to Bill Clinton. What happened at the secretive Bilderbergers meeting in June of 1991? Now, many of your people will not have heard about this. They won't have read about it in the Associated Press, in Time or Newsweek, or Life magazine, or their newspapers. They won't have heard it on TV. But there was a meeting of these very rich, powerful men, less than 200 in number. They invited only 2 U.S. governors to that meeting. Only 2. One of them was Bill Clinton, little-known governor, the state of Arkansas. The other was Doug Wilder, governor from Virginia. These were the men they chose. They auditioned. They picked to be the top
Democratic
choices.
candidates.
Democratic candidate. Now, Wilder fell off. He ran in the primaries, and after a few he had to drop out. But Bill Clinton was given the massive support. The media fell in line behind him. You remember now, when his adulterous affair with Jennifer Flowers was exposed,
Yes.
at first it wasn't exposed by the Washington Post or the New York Times or the Chicago Tribune. It was a little tabloid somewhere, you see, because the press as a whole said we can't expose things. We've got to puff this guy up.
And they've killed it too.
Of course they've killed it. It came out and then they squelched it. They had all these experts that came on and said it doesn't matter, character doesn't matter, integrity doesn't matter, as long as he's okay on jobs and economic issues.
Yeah. Money.
Well, on money. That's right, on money.
Everybody that votes for him will be voting greed.
Will be voting for greed.
In fact, the American public votes their pocketbook. Just remember that. When you go to the poll to vote, you're going to be voting your pocketbook. Or are you going to be voting according to what God has laid out for you? Are you going to be voting for integrity, what is right, or are you going to be voting? You know, you remember Jimmy Carter lost because the interest rate went to 22%. That is the only reason he lost. There is no other reason why he lost. That was the way they had of getting him out.
Well, J.R.,
somebody was tired of him. Somebody wanted him out, and they ran the interest rates up to 22%.
A pocketbook is the main reason people vote, and I have no doubt that it is. People are going to be very disappointed with Bill Clinton if he's elected, and I'll tell you why. He is a member of this secret society called the Bilderbergers. Now, that secret society has a plan for America. That plan is to impoverish this country, to bring our jobs and our factories overseas, to make the people miserable in a wretched economic state, to make us into a third world nation. We're already the world's greatest debtor. We owe more than any country in the world.
Yeah.
Did you know that of the top 20 banks in the United States, not one is American today? Japanese, the German banks, and even the English banks and Italian sit atop the top 20, not American. That's because they've taken our money and deposited it overseas. American business can't even get loans today.
Yeah.
Last year, 60% of all the loans to American business came from overseas banks. That's where our money is. They've transferred our wealth. This is planned to level us, to bring us into a submissive state where we would pliantly say, yes, we want to be part of a new world order. It'll be for our economic good. So Bill Clinton is for this. You notice that neither he nor President Bush are opposed to the New World Order. Neither Clinton nor Bush are opposed to the so-called North American Free Trade Act, which will send all our jobs and factories into Mexico, where laborers get 50 cents an hour. So you have to understand that both of these people are going to, either one that's elected will result in the destruction of the American economy, because that's what's planned, what I show in Dark Majesty. But Bill Clinton has been chosen for this particular mission in life.
In other words, shortly after the election, no matter who gets in, everything is right on the precipice, just about to fall over the cliff.
It is indeed. It's on the precipice. Now, their only hope, I should say America's only hope, is that this could possibly be, I have been hearing some reports recently from some very private sources who tell me that their plan to impoverish America is succeeding so greatly that they may not have to have a crash even. Things are going so smooth for them. They're constantly reducing the living standards and the economic conditions of America, so that within another decade, by the year 2000, we may already, all the other countries, they're escalating their standards, decreasing us. And it may not even be necessary, but right now there is no doubt a crash that has been planned. Gerald, one of the things we need to talk about here, I want people to understand, is that Bill Clinton is not only a member of the Bilderbergers, but this is a man who was almost chosen from the time he was a young man. That's the way the secret societies do it. First of all, they sent him to Georgetown University, a Jesuit school, for training. There he met with a man named Professor Carroll Quigley, who was his political science and international affairs professor.
Yes.
Quigley was his mentor. Quigley brought him into the, let's say, the deeper levels of the conspiracy. They gave him a Rhodes Scholarship, sent him to Oxford University, Bill Clinton. Where there he learned even more of the finer points and was introduced to some of the European members of the conspiracy. He came back to Yale University, where we have the Skull and Bones Society, And then they brought him back to Arkansas. Now, you have to understand about Arkansas. This is a state owned almost lock, stock, and barrel by the Rockefeller interest. In fact, one of the governors before Bill Clinton was Winthrop Rockefeller.
Yes.
Back in the 30s and the 40s, the Rockefellers brought hundreds of millions of dollars into Arkansas and bought up much of the real estate. So they basically control that state today. It is like a special interest state of the Rockefellers.
Yes.
So Clinton is a protege of the Rockefeller clan. And by the way, the Rockefellers, as you know, founded the Trilateral Commission. They're really the honchos, you might say, behind the Council on Foreign Relations. So we have, and Bill Clinton is a member of these groups.
Yes.
CFR, Trilateral Commission, Bilderbergers. A perfect insider and establishment man for the New World Order conspiracy. That's what we have in Bill Clinton.
Wow. But somebody else was there at that Baden-Baden, Germany meeting of the Bilderbergers in June of 1991. You write on page 102, Vice President Dan Quayle is another of the wealthy Bilderberger supermen. Quayle was there in person last year at the gathering. Reportedly, David Rockefeller and fellow bigwigs were duly impressed with what they saw. He's our man for 96 or sooner, one Bilderberger exclaimed. Incredible.
It is an incredible thing. People really need to read Dark Majesty to find out what went on at that meeting. Can you imagine Bill Clinton and Dan Quayle together with a small group of less than 200 rich men from all over the world meeting together at this private resort, this chalet in Baden-Baden, Germany? Now,
secret meeting.
Can you imagine Dan Quayle? There he was, with Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Wow, hold it. What's going on here, you see? Something dramatic is going on.
Now, Dan Quayle, it is said, is a dedicated Christian. I've heard him give his testimony. What's the story behind this?
I'm afraid that we have to understand something about politics. Politics uses religion.
Yeah.
It is expedient to win office as a Republican, even to win the nomination, you've got to throw bones to Christians.
Yeah, I remember back when George Bush was was for abortion.
He was one of his family, Prescott Sheldon Bush, George's father, was one of the main contributors to zero population growth and to other pro-abortion issues.
Just became expedient for him to be on the other side. That's where the votes were.
Ronald Reagan and his people told George Bush, you've got to support pro-life. That's what we stand for, and we've got to do it politically.
Yeah.
And so George Bush, only since 1980, he made a sudden reversal.
Yeah.
I am afraid that after this election, he's already given us the Supreme Court judge, David Souter, pro-abortion, anti-Christian, who has refused to overturn Roe versus Wade. Imagine who George Bush will put on the Supreme Court in the next 4 years.
Mario Cuomo?
Well, not Mario Cuomo. I hope not.
I'm kidding.
But I'll tell you, there are strange things in this world. That would be a real weird event. But people need to understand, our blessed hope is not George Bush or Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
It's Jesus Christ.
That's right.
And his coming again. That rapture that's been prophesied in Thessalonians and elsewhere in the Bible.
Yeah.
But so many people today say, well, we've got to support the Republicans because, I mean, they're the only party for us. And some people say, oh, no, we've got to support the Democrats. They must be Christian because they have two Southern Baptist born-again Christians, Clinton and Gore.
Clinton's a Southern Baptist?
Both of these men claim to be Southern Baptist, born-again Christians.
Well, let me go on record right now as saying they're both heretics. And I mean that. They are both absolute heretics. Clinton wrote a book in which he said that he was a Baptist, and then he went right on a few pages later in the following pages to say that all of the Christian ministers and Christianity in general has been unforgivably against saving the environment. And when he said unforgivably, that just shows how narrow-minded he really is, how bigoted he is. It shows that he's not willing to forgive. He calls it unforgivably. And especially people who talk about prophecy and use the apocalypse. And of course, that stings me because I believe in studying the Bible. And I know What the Bible says, when you look at the day of the Lord, you'll find 18 passages in the Old Testament where the day of the Lord is given. In every place, it says it's a bad day, it's a dark day, it's a cloudy day, it's a day of judgment, the men will weep bitterly, and so on and so on. It's a time of judgment when half of the population of the planet will die because of Armageddon and all of these other things that are going to take place. The sun will turn as black as sackcloth of ashes. The moon will turn as blood. Fire will devour a third of the earth. The sea, a third of the sea will turn to blood. It is incredible, but I know the Bible is true, and it will come to pass, even though Al Gore doesn't think it will.
Al Gore says you're a heretic if you believe in Bible prophecy. He said you're a despoiler of the earth. He said if you believe that, then you won't clean up the earth. That's a very strange thing. You know, Christians are true stewards of God's creation.
Yeah.
But we do not believe that the creation is God. Al Gore actually said that the cosmos, the planet, animals, the forest, and even people, we are all God. He said in his book, and I have a copy of it, I want people to know we have the book that J.R. Church is referring to. He said that there's no personal God in heaven out there somewhere. He said nature is God in its fullest. This is a man who would be our vice president of the United States, a man who does not believe in a personal God in heaven who loves us.
And he quotes and gives acclaim to Teilhard de Chardin, the Jesuit priest who is one of the fathers of the New Age movement.
Yes, the Catholic Church itself actually came down and reprimanded Teilhard de Chardin because he believed that the earth is God and man is God. Now Al Gore says the new faith of the future must be de Chardin's. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
He said only when we recognize there's no personal God and that there's wisdom in Hinduism, Buddhism, the Mother Earth Goddess movement. He said only then, when we recognize the wisdom in all faiths, can we solve the environmental crisis. What a man. Do we want this man to be vice president of the United States?
Let's face it, somebody's going to be. On our next program, and our final one in this series of 4, we're going to show you the two faces of George Bush. So it's going to be quite an explosive time together. We'll be back in just a moment. We've been interviewing Texe Marrs. He is the author of the book Dark Majesty, The Secret Brotherhood and the Magic of 1,000 Points of Light. This is our 4th and final interview with Texe on this series, and we have uncovered some absolutely incredible things. On today's program, let's talk about the magic of 1,000 points of light. What's that all about?
You know, in 1988, George Bush accepted the nomination to be the Republican Party's candidate for President of the United States, and he gave a spectacular speech. And several times during the speech, he made a mysterious comment or phrase about 1,000 points of light. And then in 1990, in his State of the Union speech, he talked about his shining purpose as president was the illumination of mankind by 1,000 points of light. Many, many people came to me later and said, I know something is wrong with that. What does that mean? Now, it caught on in the nation. Randy Travis, the country singer, even crooned a tune. Through the sponsorship, by the way, the White House actually contacted him and had a hit country song called Point of Light. At the same time, there has been a foundation begun, $5 million of our taxpayers' money, to set up an organization called the Points of Light Foundation. What we have to understand is there is a deep occultic meaning behind the term 1,000 points of light. So what I said in Dark Majesty, what I show is that there is magic, black magic, behind this term. I spend several chapters talking about this because it is so deep. What people have to understand is this. First of all, the occultists believe in a God. Not a God like we might imagine. An energy force who to them represents the light. The sun even, the shining sun, represents this great light to them. Basically, they worship Lucifer, the light bearer, the morning sun. who, of course, is the false light of this world.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about 1,000 points of light, this is an occultic term that means simply this. There's the great light of Lucifer. Then all of his human agents on earth are the 1,000 points of light.
Mm-hmm.
This is the networking of Satan throughout the world. Light centers who are sponsors of the evangelistic message of Lucifer himself. This is the 1,000 points of light. For example, there is an occultic organization in New York City. Actually, it has its European counterpart as well in Geneva, Switzerland. It's called the Lucis Trust. It was formerly known as the Lucifer Publishing Company. Now they have the combination. It's Lucifer and Isis combined, the great Egyptian goddess of light. And they call it Lucis, the Lucis Trust. They've also established the Lucis Trust, the World Goodwill, which seems like a wonderful organization, set up to build a new world order. The Lucis Trust says that they were given a prayer for the new age by their spirit guide, the Tibetan master, Dwal Kul. Now we're talking about a demon spirit whom they say is communicating with them. You say these people must be wacko. Let me tell you, there are people such as Robert McNamara, former Secretary of Defense, some of the richest and most powerful people in the world involved in the goals of the Lucis Trust and World Goodwill. In this prayer that they have, and by the way, it's entitled The Great Invocation. They're invoking their New Age Messiah to come forth.
Yeah.
It makes reference to point of light. It says, may the point of light stream into the minds of men. And so we have the greater light of Lucifer and the lesser lights of men. The light of Lucifer streaming into the minds of men. Now you say, well, who would pay attention to a New Age prayer that talks about the point of light or points of light? At the Great Earth Summit down in Rio de Janeiro last June, 131 world leaders were there to consider the environment. Al Gore was there, the vice presidential running mate. Everybody from Fidel Castro, the Prime Minister of Japan, the Chancellor Helmut Kohl of Germany was there. Francois Mitterrand, the President of France, and President George Herbert Walker Bush. George Bush, our president, was there to uplift the environment, to find out what could be done. They had an opening prayer.
The satanic prayer.
Thousands of people sat there in the auditorium, and they had an opening prayer, an invocation.
The points of light.
The great invocation of the Lucis Trust was read. That was the prayer. I mean, we're talking about a satanic congregation.
Yeah.
H.G. Wells, who actually said that he was a member of this conspiracy, wrote some books back in the 1930s. This is the man, J.R., that gave us books, science fiction books, The War of the Worlds,
Yes.
The Invisible Man. Did you know that he wrote a book in which he said this? He said the new planned world state, that's the world government that he was for, he said that will come about not at one big time, but it will come about because of 1,000 points all working together.
Yeah.
1,000 points.
So when
light.
George Bush talked about 1,000 points of light, he was actually lifting the terminology from this occult New Age agenda.
I'm afraid that's exactly right.
That's not
what I prove in Dark Majesty.
Yeah, that's not the only thing he talked about. You have gone through his speech meticulously and have found half a dozen or more phrases and statements that he makes that are lifted right out of Alice Bailey's works and other esoteric, occultic publications. In fact, the magazine for the Lucis Trust is called The Beacon. A point of light.
A point of light.
Yeah, incredible. And there's a lot more here than we can possibly go into. I hope you will get this book. And let's talk about George Bush now and the Skull and Bone Society. What's that all about?
The question is, why would George Bush use occultic illuminist language in his speeches when he talks about the New World Order and 1,000 points of light? You have to go back in time to the point when he was first initiated into an occult secret society called the Order of Skull and Bones. Now, a lot of people say, oh, wasn't that at Yale? the few people who know about it.
Yeah.
They say, wasn't that at Yale University? Isn't that a fraternity? The answer is no, it's not a fraternity. It actually is in New Haven, Connecticut. It's not on the campus. It's a huge building called the Tomb. It has no windows, but it's giant, like a gigantic mausoleum. Next door to it is an ancient graveyard. It has imposing doors straight out of some Gothic novel. Now, in that imposing structure of evil, 15 young men, juniors at Yale, are initiated each year in an occultic ceremony, satanic beyond our imaginations. But these men, this is not fun and games. They're these pampered, spoiled, rich boys are trained on what they are expected to do in the future. They are told you are favored. In fact, let me tell you what they're told as part of their initiation ceremony. They're told that they are special. They're selected to rule the world. They're the God men. And then they're told that all those outside the order are 1, barbarians, 2, vandals, and 3, Gentiles. They're the special ones. Everyone else is a barbarian, a vandal, or a Gentile. And then they're initiated into the most incredible ceremony that involves a coffin. They lay nude in a coffin while in a red velvet lined room. In fact, I think this is the only Christian book ever published that actually gives, literally, point by point, how the initiation is given. I even show in here where a Supreme Court Justice of the United States took place in one of these sessions, dressed in an occultic costume, like a skeleton.
It's a member of the Skull and Bones.
Member of the Skull and Bones. They have human remains there. They put a blindfold over the candidate who's lying in his coffin, and then hooded members with robes on, with occultic Masonic symbols, paraded with candles around the coffin, chanting occult oaths. And this person, actually, it is said that he receives a born-again experience. He's baptized, you might say, into the order. It is, according to Roger Javins, a friend of mine who is a Yale graduate and a true computer. He's an engineer, and he's a specialist in computers. But he told me when he was at Yale, he did a complete study of this. He went back all the way back to 1832, when the Skull and Bone Society was first founded. He was appalled.
Out of Germany?
Well, it was Germany because General Russell, who founded this group, based on Freemasonry, by the way, it is really a black lodge of Freemasonry. But he first went over to Germany, and there they had the death head, as you know.
And you have a picture of it here in the book.
I do indeed have a picture. I think it might be on page 153. It is, in fact.
Yeah.
This is actually the logo of the
Skull and Bones.
The Skull and Bones Society. Above you see here the Skull and Bones. This is right out of, this is documented. This is right out of their own reports and information. Now notice that underneath it I put a picture of one of the field marshals of the Death Head Corps of Kaiser Wilhelm, who plunged us into World War I.
Yes.
Later on, Hitler, of course, had the Thule and the Vril societies he was a member of. Then he had his death head, the SS Gestapo. German origins, and yet higher level Black Lodge Masonic as well. Now, J.R. noticed that under the Skull and Bones, there is a cryptic, mysterious number, 322.
Yeah.
That group, they're in New Haven, Connecticut, where George Bush, and by the way, there are at least 3 U.S. senators who have powerful positions. There are people in the media,
well, the people
powerful positions that are members of Skull and Bones.
The people you've mentioned in this book are absolutely incredible in their positions in politics and in not only in government but also in the business world, in corporations. These men fund each other. It's
That's
like
right.
a society that builds. There are about 600 of these people, 15 a year initiated
Around
in
the
the Skull
whole
and
world,
Bones.
there are less than 600.
And they are actually helping each other to live a privileged life. In fact, George Bush became president through the efforts of the other members of the Skull and Bones who jockeyed him into position and placed him in the White House.
It would sound preposterous, except that it's fully documented here. I traced George Bush, his entire life. On the third Thursday of May 1947, he was initiated at the tomb into the Skull and Bones. Ever since, his life has been guided by this invisible hand.
But his father
Skull and Bonesman.
His father was a member of the Skull and Bones.
That's right. In 1917, I show Prescott Sheldon Bush, who was really a big shot in banking, and by the way, became a U.S. Senator from New England, was initiated. So it's an intergenerational thing. You can't become a member of Skull and Bones unless the alumni select you, and you're chosen, not be out of merit, although there are some very brilliant men that have been involved in it, but because of your family status, blood. The bloodline is the reason it's chosen. George Bush was chosen because of his father and his family. And ever since, he went into the oil business. He was chosen for that. He was told where to go down to Texas. He was set up. Later, he was given privileged positions. He was put into political office as a congressman. When he lost the senatorial race to Lloyd Bentsen in Texas, they said, no problem. The Rockefeller interest went to Nixon, and I show that in here. President Nixon. They said, here's a man, we want you to give him a position of importance. He became, in succession, special envoy to Red China. He became the United Nations ambassador, and then finally, the director of the CIA, because the Skull and Bones, I show in here, have owned, lock, stock, and barrel, the Central Intelligence Agency from its very inception. All of these connections, incredible power in the hands of a few.
Back in the mid-1970s, Bilderberger meeting in Arizona had 15 Russians attending.
Wow, now I don't believe this has ever been exposed on a television show in America.
From that day, it looked like the Soviet Union began to make plans toward its dismantling. Is it possible that Gorbachev was one of those men attending? Is it possible that Gorbachev was a CIA mole? You asked these questions in your book. What do you think about it?
I believe he absolutely was. Gorbachev, during his last visit to the United States, when he made his famous speech in Missouri, where Winston Churchill had talked about the Iron Curtain, Gorbachev came to America. He was funded by the Esalen Institute, which is a New Age think tank in California. You know, it was very ironic. Did you know that Gorbachev, not only was the trip funded, he's being set up by these same men. He, as you know, has an institute now in Moscow for democracy. Here's a butcher who has killed thousands of his fellow citizens, but did bring his glasnost and some changes over there in the Soviet Union. He flew around on an airplane while he was in America this last trip. It was an airplane owned by Forbes magazine. We're talking about capitalism there and money interest at its height. Did you know that they had a name on that plane? The name of the plane, owned by Forbes magazine, they flew Gorbachev around in. The name of that airplane is Capitalist Tool.
Capitalist
Tool.
T-O-O-L?
T-O-O-L.
Really?
Gorbachev flew around on an airplane named Capitalist Tool
That's incredible.
During his last visit. But there is no doubt that Gorbachev has worked very closely with many different interests in Europe behind the scenes for years, even before he became the first secretary of the Communist Party. The man before him, Andropov, was very old, very sick, and basically Gorbachev, from what it appears and what I show in Dark Majesty, from the very beginning was working close with the CIA to undermine his communist system, to bring everything into the New World Order. That's why he talks about the New World Order incessantly.
Yeah. Well, he tells the story that back in the early days when he got out of Yale, that he went off to Midland, Texas, and started from the ground up, away from his family. He wanted to be a self-made man, a self-made millionaire.
George Bush's rise to success as a businessman.
Yeah, his old dilapidated jalopy Studebaker. Tell us about that.
You know, his biographers say that he had a as you mentioned, a dilapidated old Studebaker that he drove down to Texas, started from scratch with Barbara there, and there he worked. He got an entry-level job in the oil field, worked his way up. Pretty soon he owns Zapata Oil Company, and the rest is history.
Okay.
Well, what I show in Dark Majesty is the truth. First of all, there weren't any foreign limos and the sports cars back then in America. Studebaker was pretty ritzy, pretty sporty. His father gave him a brand new Studebaker when he graduated from Yale. He was brought down to Texas and put under the charge of a man named Neil Mallon.
Now, he didn't drive that Studebaker to Texas.
Oh, no. A paid employee drove the Studebaker, the brand new Studebaker. He flew down in the personal airplane of a man named Neil Mallon. Neil Mallon, by the way, I want you to know something. Neil Mallon was a man who's not only so important for George Bush's life because he set him up in the oil business and made him into an a so-called rich oil man, although George Bush was already one of the richest men in America from his family's interest.
Well, his family owns interest in the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. They're one of the Class A stockholders, and the more money we spend and the more interest we have to pay on our national debt, the richer George Bush and family becomes.
Bush gets.
It's like the fox being in charge of the hen house, isn't it?
It is indeed. Most people don't know this, though. They think he's just a self-made businessman, oil man, and that's how he got it. They think he's a stew. Why, if you can be a rich oil man, successful in Texas, you deserve to be president, you can run the country.
So who helped him set up Zapata Oil?
Neil Mallon was the man who started him off, who took charge. Now, we have to know two things here. First of all, Neil Mallon is a name that George Bush gave one of his sons, Neil Mallon Bush. He named one of his sons after this man who helped him. Neil Mallon is a member of Skull and Bones. Neil Mallon was of the class, Skull and Bones class of 1917, which is the same class that George Bush's father is.
Prescott.
From. Skull and Bones, Prescott, Sheldon Bush. So here he is, his father's best friend, a fellow bonesman, and he's going to guide the life of young George Bush. And so George Bush went down. Now, Neil Mallon just happened to be the chairman and CEO of Dresser Industries, one of the world's largest oil drilling equipment firms.
My goodness.
I'd like to get a start like that in an quote-unquote entry-level position. Now, Neil Mallon not only helped him, but then he hooked him up with a man named Hugh Lidke. And Hugh Lidke and George Bush went into business together drilling for oil. Now, who is Hugh Lidke? Is he just a guy that says, hey, I don't have any money, let's go out and wildcat some wells? Oh, no. He's founder of Pennzoil, a billion-dollar outfit, one of the world's largest oil firms. So George Bush didn't go in with some nobody. We're talking about the heads of Pennzoil, of Dresser Industries. So he was set up from the very beginning. I mean, you're going to hit a few oil wells if Dresser and Pennzoil say, put it down here. So it was really a con job on the American people. They chose Texas because it's very hard to become president, and they had George Bush's future mapped out. If you're from some small state up in New England, but if you're from Texas, this big, populous, rich state, it's more feasible. So this was the reason they chose Texas for the path to success of George Bush.
I talked to the campaign manager of George Bush down in Texas, down in Corpus Christi, Texas one day. We had breakfast, and she was there to criticize me, you know, because I had had a few disparaging words to say about George. She said, I'm going to tell him everything you said. You know, that could that could get me in trouble. I said, well, what did I say that wasn't true? She said, well, he is a self-made millionaire, oil man. He's against his family background, and he's for all these good things, you know. And I said, oh, he owns an oil company. I said, where's his oil wells? Well, she said, they're in Kuwait.
In Kuwait.
That's what she said. What can I say?
And his son also has interest down there, Hurricane Energy Company. So he had a great personal interest, personal fortune in that area. George Bush, by the way, went on, as you know, to become director of the CIA. He had no qualifications whatsoever. But one of the things we're going to know for sure is that Skull and Bones Society has always had the influence of running the CIA. Now, when George Bush recently nominated a man named Bill Gates to be director of the Central Intelligence Agency, he sent the nomination to Congress. Many people said, how is this man going to get in? I mean, he has some bad things on his record in the past. What they didn't know was that there is a senator, a U.S. senator, named David Boren from Oklahoma, who just happens to be the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who confirmed Bill Gates, George Bush's choice.
Goodness.
David Boren is a member of the Skull and Bones Society.
And Gates?
Well, Gates, as far as I know, is not a member. But the fact is he was handpicked by the Skull and Bones brothers to run this agency on their behest.
Goodness. It's a fascinating book. I hope you'll get your copy of it. We'll be back in just a moment to tell you how.
In today's Middle East, events change daily. In this turmoil, global finance and politics play a major but confusing role. To help you understand today's news from a prophetic perspective, J.R. Church publishes a monthly newspaper. You'll enjoy his latest research in Bible prophecy. Order an introductory subscription today absolutely free just by calling 1-800-475-1111. When the operator answers, just say that you'd like to receive an introductory subscription to Prophecy in the News. We'll mail you the next 6 issues free with our compliments. Call toll-free 1-800-475-1111 or write to Prophecy in the News, Post Office Box 7000, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73153. Prophecy in the News wants you to stay informed, so call or write today. Again, that address is Prophecy in the News, Post Office Box 7000, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73153.
I want to thank you for watching this very, very important story of the men who would rule over us, the secret brotherhood. And I want you to have a copy of this book, Dark Majesty, the Secret Brotherhood and the Magic of 1,000 Points of Light. I believe we can save many in these last days. We can certainly let people know of the coming of Christ. There is an Illuminati, a secret brotherhood. And this all fits in with Bible prophecy. For your gift of $12 or more, we'll send you this book, Dark Majesty, 15 chapters, almost 300 pages. Just write to us and send us your gift of $12 or more to Living Truth Publishers, 8104 Quezon Circle, Austin, Texas, 78745. That's Living Truth Publishers, 8104 Quezon Circle, Austin, Texas, 78745. If you want to use your Visa or MasterCard, simply call toll-free at no charge to you. That's 1-800-234-WORD. 1-800-234-WORD. Now that's W-O-R-D. Word. 1-800-234-WORD. And when you call or write, I want to give you a free gift, Flashpoint, our monthly newsletter. I know it'll be a blessing to you. We talk about Bible prophecy, world conspiracies, about some political events you're not going to hear about unless you get Flashpoint. Totally free. For your subscription, just call that toll-free number, 1-800-234-WORD, or write to us, 8104 Quezon Circle, Austin, Texas, 78745. Again, for your love gift of $12 or more, the book Dark Majesty, but the subscription to Flashpoint is totally free. I want you to know the truth, because Jesus said, the truth shall make you free. Until next time, this is Texe Mars saying, may God richly bless you and your family.
This program is a production of Prophecy in the News, Incorporated. For more information and a free copy of our newspaper, write to J.R. Church at Post Office Box 7000, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73153. And join us again next time for Prophecy in the News.